Good afternoon, everybody. I'll be starting the presentation in another minute or so. I'm going to let everybody sign on. So we'll begin shortly. All right, good afternoon. It's 1 minute after 2, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you very much for joining us, everybody, for our webinar today on our second in this series of webinars on hurricane preparation and recovery. For those who don't know me, my name is Chris Demers. I'm the Extension Program Manager for the Florida Land Steward Program at the University of Florida IFAS School of Forest, Fisheries, and Geomatics Sciences. The purpose of our program is really to help and encourage private landowners to actively manage their forest and land resources for multiple benefits, economic benefits, wildlife benefits, environmental benefits. Um, just helping to keep your land in some kind of production and healthy state for the future. Um, so the second in a series, I do want to encourage everybody to advance my slide here, to please use the question and answer function to ask any questions that you have. You can use the chat if you want to. At the end, I probably won't be monitoring the chat. I'll be monitoring that Q&A. So use that to ask questions. And if you feel like using the chat to chat with somebody you might recognize or know that's also on the webinar, you can feel free to do that. Also want to encourage you to complete the very short evaluation that'll pop up at the end of the webinar. Should pop up in your browser when the webinar is done. We appreciate your feedback. That helps us to report outcomes and get your feedback about the program, what you learn, what you might take away, what you might use. Also want to encourage you to access the presentation slides and other reading materials that go along with the webinar today. All the materials and slides for this and all of our Florida Land Steward webinars and past events are available at that link. When you get to that link, that page, you're going to look under 2021 Hurricane Prep and Recovery webinars. And just to let you know what that page, what it looks like when you get to the home page, this third paragraph down here, and this part here that's circled Florida Land Steward events and webinars. That's where you can access all the materials, recordings of past webinars. Everything is right there for you. So feel free to access all that material and information. All right, well, before we get started with the presentation, I've got some poll questions. I want to get to know a little bit about who's joining us today. I'm going to launch the poll here. Just a couple of quick questions for you to answer. If you can go ahead and just answer those questions. I believe the first one is a one answer only. And then the second question, who do you use? That's a multiple answers possible with that. So go ahead and fill out those and then we'll get started with the presentation. Just want to get an idea of your background and in this information. All right, I'll leave it open for a few more seconds, and then I'll end it, and we'll show the results. All right, looks like about half haven't experienced a hurricane hitting their property yet, and some have not yet had a hurricane hit the property. And it looks like people get their information and assistance from a variety of sources. Great to see people working with a consulting forester. That is by far probably the best source of information and assistance. And of course, these other agencies and services are great too. All right, thank you for sharing that information. All right. So if you tuned into the first webinar in this series on building a resilient operation, I kind of shared the sources that we're using to put this series together. The first is this Pine Forest Landowner's Guide that's available on that materials page. This was put together by the USDA Forest Service and other partners. My boss, Michael Andrew, was involved in putting this guide together as well. This kind of goes through several steps in the process of preparing for hurricane and making your property more resilient. We've also got a EDIS publication. That's the electronic data information source. That's where we keep all of our publications that prepare your forest property for hurricane season. Is now available. That's also available on the materials page. This particular presentation follows that publication fairly closely in terms of the outline and the flow. And then there's several other publications on hurricane preparation and just tips and feedback from the field. Some of these things we've kind of picked up from experience from people that have been through this in the last few years. This is one of the first pages in that guide that kind of talks about the process from initial site planning when you're looking for land, kind of things to look for and things to learn about where your property is, to the first part, building resilient operation. That was the first webinar in this series. I encourage you to look at the recording of that, which is available on that materials page. That goes through a lot of different types of information about basically good forest management, things you can do to get your property ready for the storm, and also just to make your property healthy and productive. That also goes into long-term operation and maintenance, things you do on kind of annual to monthly basis. And then the third section, this is what we're talking about today, is the short-term preparedness. When we're just days or weeks out from the first storm, things that are good to do to get the property ready in the short term. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, that section 3 of the guide. And then on August 26th, I believe, we're going to do the last webinar in this series, which is on post-hurricane recovery, where to get assistance, how to assess the damage in your pine stands, which trees should go, which trees can stay, how to get a handle on what the status of the damage is that's occurred in the stand as a result of the storm. Well, first of all, before you start thinking about your property, of course, you want to think about yourself, your family. You want to get all your essentials ready to go. This is a really good book, a good website on the IFAS, IFAS disaster and preparation. Just a variety of information. This guidebook on disaster preparedness is in there. It goes into hurricane preparation, also flood preparation. It covers different types of disasters that can take place and how to prepare. But you want to have a good idea of where you're at, know where you're getting your emergency information, sign up for the appropriate alerts, know your evacuation zone, your evacuation route. I know a lot of folks that own forest property they have their residence elsewhere, and sometimes that residence might be near the coast or near where a hurricane may be approaching. So it's really important to know what your evacuation zone is, what the route is. Have your kit ready, your supplies for 72 hours, all that stuff that that you hear hammered on in the news. Really important to be prepared for the hurricane. It's right now. There is we're in a tax-free holiday for hurricane supplies. So batteries, flashlights, coolers, generators are all tax-free this week from May 28th through this Sunday, June 6th. So it's a good time to stock up on some of these things if you don't have them already. And then for a full list of qualifying items, that link there. And if you download the slides for this presentation, that link is live, and you can get that list of qualifying items for the tax holiday by the Florida Department of Revenue. So take a look at that. Well, this is one of the first slides that we showed in the first webinar, and I'm going to show it again just to, assess your risk, know where you're at. This is a model of return periods for major hurricanes. The red areas being places where the strongest storms happen more frequently, basically, is what this means. So if you're in those counties that are in the reds and the yellows, those are higher frequency of major strong storms. And this comes as probably no surprise to anybody who's looking at this and has lived in the Southeast for any amount of time. These are the areas that really get hit hard by storms and get hit fairly frequently. So know your risk, know where you're at, know what the kind of the return period is for the major hurricanes. Of course, who knows what this season's going to bring. They're predicting above average activity, but we shall see, right? Site characteristics. What kind of a zone does your property sit in? What's the flood risk? Are you near the coast? Is there a risk of storm surge? These are excellent resources from FEMA, Florida Department of Emergency Management, Flood Risk, and NOAA. These are really good resources. You can get onto these sites and ascertain what the flood risk is of your property, either from coastal flooding or from rivers, streams, etc. These are really good, helpful resources to assess the risk of your property. We went into forest inventory on that first webinar. I want to go into it again because it's really helpful to have an inventory. And if you're working with a consulting forester, chances are you've got some kind of a forest inventory, most likely. But if you've got a lot of value in timber, it's a really good idea to have an inventory to help you know what the value is, what types of forest products you have on your property. Do you have saw timber? Do you have pulpwood? Do you have chip and saw? Do you have higher value products like plywood, ply logs, poles? It's a good idea to know what that value is. And knowing that can help you, of course, helps guide the management that's going to take place on the property. So you want to have a good idea of what you have and what needs to be done to get where you want to go. And knowing that information can help you help guide management. Is it time for a thinning? Is it time for harvest? Of course, a lot of these operations we've learned should take place outside of hurricane season, especially thinning. If you're going to be doing a thinning, really a good idea to avoid hurricane season if that's going to take place, if at all possible. and we're gonna hit on that a couple times. If you've got a thinning going on and there's a hurricane approaching, really best to shut down that operation and let the storm pass. Um, so with your inventory, these are the kinds of measurements that are going to take place. What are the species? What are the number of trees per acre? Tree diameters and heights. And we've got a couple of publications about forest inventory. One of those kind of goes into the basics of what's in a forest inventory. Another one kind of goes into a little bit more detail, so you can maybe learn how to conduct some of those measurements yourself and give kind of a good ballpark estimate of the value that you have in your forest stands. Yeah, this is a big important point. Is if there's thinning going on, you're not going to want to have that operation going on during when there's a hurricane projected to make landfall in the area. And so what can happen is you're going to open that stand structure. You're going to leave the remaining trees much more susceptible to wind throw. Um, when you have some density in there, trees can kind of lean on each other. They protect each other from some of those strong winds, and so you can have a little bit better survival when the trees are a little more dense. And then after the stand is thin, those trees can adapt and, uh, and 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 grow into that space, and will eventually um, get to sizes and root strength and branch strength to withstand some of those winds. But right after the stand is thinned, that's when they're most vulnerable to wind throw and damage. So really important point. All right, we're talking about infrastructure now, the roads, drainage, kind of immediate things that you can do um, when they're during hurricane season, when there might be a storm approaching, is make sure those ditches and culverts, drains are all cleared out to let the water flow. Um, of course, we know that hurricanes can produce a large amount of rainfall in a short period, so that can cause erosion, can undermine roads, wash away culverts. So really good idea to check all that infrastructure, make sure that it's intact and clear and the water's able to move. Check your roads, go through and make sure that there's no signs of erosion. If you've got erosion taking place or damage taking place after a heavy summer, routine summer thunderstorm, probably a good idea to go in there and address that to just to make sure that it's in good condition before the big storm hits. If those summertime thunderstorms are putting it to the test, chances are a hurricane's going to do quite a bit more damage. Talk about daylighting, and you see this picture here where there's the vegetation's been cleared out from 6 to 10 feet from the road edge, and what that does is allow the road to dry more quickly after it rains, and also it can reduce the vegetation that might fall across that road and create problems with access and whatnot after the storm. So if it's feasible, it may not be feasible in every case, but it's a good idea to have that daylighting function on the road so that you get that drying after some heavy rain. Talk about BMPs a little bit. Best management practices. The best management practices provide guidelines for all silvicultural operations. Forest roads is a part of that. Make sure that your stream crossings meet BMP guidelines. Culverts and everything are properly installed. There's a Florida BMP guide that's accessible at that link. There's a U.S. Forest Service Road Construction Maintenance Handbook. That's a really good resource to look at. Get to learn about your best road designs, bridges, culverts, and then Alabama Extension has a good document on forest roads and construction of water diversion devices. So all those resources are available. If you, like I said, if you download the slides, all those links will be active, and you can access those. Also, want to encourage you to contact the best management practices forester for your region, and if you have any questions or concerns, they can help you out and give you some guidance on best management practices, road designs, drainage, and whatnot. They've got some good resources. All right. Well, everybody's got limbs and dead branches hanging in places. So when it's feasible, obviously you're not going to want to go through all of your property and get rid of dead branches and limbs, but stuff that's hanging over roads, over bridges, over structures where things can fall and cause problems, cause damage, cause problems with access. Get those things cleaned up. It's a good idea. To reduce the limbs and material that can cause damage and access problems. Going through the checklist of things now. Make sure your tanks are full. If you got fuel tanks, water, chainsaw oil, fuel oil, make sure that's all topped off so it's available after the storm. Also, will kind of minimize the movement of these things when they're stored. If they're heavy, they're not going to blow around as much. So make sure everything is full and topped off before the storm. Check on your emergency equipment. Make sure your generators, your chainsaws, air compressors are all in good working order, because that you're going to most likely need these things after the storm, especially if you get hit by a big one. You're going to need generators, chainsaws, all that equipment. Make sure it's in good working order before the storm. Communications devices, phone batteries charged. Get your handheld radios if you've got them for your family, for your crew, so you can be in communication after the storm. This is basically the checklist part of the presentation. Just kind of going down the line and just making sure everything is in good working order. Hazmats should be stored in a secure cabinet. Make sure everything is secured properly before the storm. You're not going to want to have this stuff laying around, especially where it's where it can come in contact with those high winds and whatnot. You don't want to mess or hazardous waste spill. Make sure you've got a good locker and these things are all secured. If you've got gasoline pumps, make sure that they're all shut down before the storm. Security, that's another topic unto itself. But really, long and short of it is you want to make sure all your gates are secured and locked. You want to prevent any unauthorized entry. We don't want people getting injured out there after the storm. We want to reduce liability, prevent damage to the roads. Hazardous conditions exist after storms, so make sure your gates are locked and people can't get in there directly after the storm. And of course, good idea to have your signs posted on your gates and of course along your boundaries as well. Documentation. Make sure we take photos of your timber stands before the storm. It's a good idea to have documentation of what everything looks like before the storm, after the storm. Have a good record of the condition of your stands. And this is all going to help for insurance claim if you've got timber insurance. And it can also help with government assistance programs that might be available after the storm. get organized, right? This is a do as I say, not as I do kind of thing. Getting organized, making sure everything is making sure you can find everything. Basically, if you've got important information about important things, make sure you know where things are. All your paperwork, documentation, your insurance papers, cost share programs, your management plan. Make sure all that exists and you know where it is. Um, Recovery may not be available as we're learning after after Hurricane Michael. You know, the assistance programs take time to get in effect and get authorized, get legislated. So you could be looking at months or years after a major storm before assistance is available. So really important to have the information stored and ready to go for the purposes of insurance compensation, recovery assistance, thorough record keeping of the damages and losses. All that can help a great deal and help the adjusters and help the agencies with ascertaining the assistance that might be needed. Good idea if you've got timber insurance to review the policies with the agent. Make sure you've got adequate coverage. If you need flood insurance, make sure that's included. And of course, you know, kind of goes without saying, you want to have that insurance for property, vehicles, any equipment that might be necessary to have insurance for. And of course, be aware that there's limitations on how soon coverage can take effect. Um, and of course, insurance policies won't cover damage if the policy was not in place before the hurricane. So if you're gonna get insurance, it's a good time to get it now, and not wait till 2 weeks before the storm or when that storm is on its way across the Atlantic. And there's generally two types of insurance: insurance for standing timber, which is for mature timber to offset losses, and then reforestation insurance, which can be used to help replant non-merchantable stands that were lost to the wind or to fire. Um, those are the two general types of timber insurance. All right, you're talking about the inventory again, and kind of get into you know where should you have that inventory and a lot of these documents. It's good idea to have these in multiple places. Have it on your computer and in a waterproof file box on the cloud-based server. This kind of gets back to the organization, having some of these documents in multiple places, so that you can get to them when you need them. And then, of course, taking pictures before and after the storm is a really good idea. Hurricane tracking and planning. If you've got your favorite, bookmark your favorite weather websites. I like the NOAA hurricane map. Kind of shows the storm and shows the track, and then you can check out the radar as it's getting closer. Keep a good eye on the storm, see where it's going. Check out your radio alerts. Really good idea to stay connected to this information as storms are approaching. And of course, if you've lived in the Southeast for any amount of time, this is probably routine, but good idea to get connected to this information. And I can't emphasize enough to get connected to with the professionals that are available to help. A lot of you are working with private consultants. Really good idea to get to know your county forester with the Florida Forest Service. They're going to have good access and good information about assistance programs in your area after the storm. Your Florida Forest Service BMP foresters, they can help you with roads and drainage issues. Really good idea to get with them before the storm hits to make sure that your roads and drainage is in good shape. Your county extension agent with IFAS, your county extension office. Usually that's your agricultural or natural resources agent. They're an excellent source of assistance, especially if you've got some agricultural operations as well. Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission, landowner assistance biologists. Some of you are working with them as well. They're also very good sources of information, well connected. And then, of course, the main sources of the cost share programs and assistance programs are your USDA agencies, your Natural Resource Conservation Service, and USDA Farm Service Agency. I gave a call to the state office for the Farm Service Agency and asked if it's a good idea for landowners to go ahead and get their farm forms filled out ahead of time with the Farm Service Agency. And she said, absolutely. So I put that in this presentation. It's also in the first presentation in this series. There's one thing I want to hammer home with this series is to encourage landowners, farmers to get those farm records filled out ahead of time. Don't wait for a disaster to strike before you get the paperwork filled out, because as we learned from Hurricane Michael, 3 years after that storm, they're still backed up. And it's not necessarily anybody's fault. People waited for after the storm to fill out their application, and the agency simply didn't have the capacity to deal with the backlog. And so, if we can get landowners to fill out those farm forms, get those submitted to the USDA Farm Service Agency ahead of time, that way you're in the system and you'll receive e-notifications about recovery programs such as the Emergency Forest Restoration Program, which is kind of the primary ongoing program for storm damaged timber, and then there's other programs as well. After Hurricane Michael, we had that timber recovery block grant that was authorized and came along to help reimburse landowners for lost timber. Anyway, hopefully those kinds of things will be available. But anyway, having your paperwork filled out ahead of time is a really good idea. And if you've got your records in, if it's been a while since you've gotten them in, you might want to go ahead and take a look, make sure that they're all current, up to date. If you've added any property to your holdings, make sure all that's accounted for. And then that's the link to get to the page where you can access those pages where you can fill out your farm records. A lot of you are working with a consulting forester. If you're not, they're great resources, and they can help you in all phases of management. The things that county foresters aren't able to help you with, such as doing a forest inventory, helping you sell timber, those kinds of things. Consulting foresters are able to do those types of services. Management plan preparation, if you've got larger acres, inventory, planting, site prep, the works. So working with a consultant in all phases of management is a great thing. And I think it really, from what I understand and from what I've heard from landowners that work with a consultant, it definitely pays to do that. We've got a good publication on selecting a consulting forester there. One thing that where Florida is different than other states, Georgia and Alabama have registered licensed forester programs. So consultants have to be licensed and registered with the state in order to practice as a consultant. Florida does not have that. And so there are some things to look for when you're hiring a consulting forester. You want to make sure you're hiring a professional. We go into some of those things in that publication, things to look for. Some of their affiliations are important, such as the Society of American Foresters, Association of Consulting Foresters, you want to make sure they're engaged with continuing education, and they're keeping up to date with things they need to be keeping up to date with. So those are helpful guides if you haven't hired a consulting forester, or maybe you want to check on those things to make sure your forester is up to snuff in Florida. Good idea to get to know the players in the industry in your area. The Florida Forestry Association is kind of a good central organization where all the players, the loggers, the consultants, industry, the mills, they're all members of the Florida Forestry Association. So they have an annual meeting each year. You can go and get to know the people that are operating across the state and in your area. They also have local membership meetings once or twice a year, where they have a meeting in your area, and so you can get to know the people that are operating, the loggers, the consultants, all the mills. It's good to get to know those folks, so that when problems arise, disasters hit, you want to have those folks know who you are and have some connection to them, so recovery can get going on your property. So encourage you to get involved, become a member of the Florida Forestry Association if you're not. Also want to encourage you to get certified, get your forest certified. In the South, the most common, most active certification program is the American Tree Farm System. I think some of you are probably certified already in the tree farm system. Basically, the way the certification programs work is it's basically third-party verification of sustainable forest management. So if you're certified in the American Tree Farm System, the things that you're doing on your property meet the standards of sustainability for the American Tree Farm System. Each region in the South, we have a regional certificate that goes with the tree farm. Whenever you harvest wood on your property, that wood has that certificate, and that certificate goes through the process from the woods to the logger to the mill out to the consumer. That certificate goes with the products from the woods all the way to the shelf. All the wood in the tree farm system have the labels of the Florida the Sustainable Forestry Initiative. They're a part of that chain of custody. They're also a part of the chain of custody of the program for the endorsement of forest certification programs, which is an international certification program. So when your forest is certified, the wood harvested from that forest is also certified. Each state has its own affiliate program. In Florida, we have the Florida Tree Farm Program. Get information about that at that link. The Florida Tree Farm Program is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that administers the program in Florida. And as I said, each state has their own affiliate organization, and of course, it's closely affiliated with the Sustainable Forestry Initiative Implementation Committee in Florida, and those industry and non-government partners. And if you have any questions about that, just get a hold of me, drop me an email. I'll be happy to share some information on the tree farm program and how to go about getting certified. All right. Well, this is a pretty short presentation. It's less than an hour, but I want to make sure that we take time to ask questions. If you've got questions, I see someone's using the chat. I'll check that. Post the resources page link for those who came in late. Yes. Yep. I'm actually going to hit that next. All right, there's the for the person who put that in the chat, all the recordings, slides, other materials are available on this resources page. And if you download the slides, all the links are active. But in fact, if you Google Florida Land Steward or UF Florida Land Steward, that's probably the quickest way to get to that page. And then once you're on the home page, which looks like this, you're going to go down to this third paragraph, and that's the link that'll take you to that page. And then you're going to, from there, just look for the 2021 Hurricane Preparation and Recovery webinars. And from there, that'll take you to the slides and materials, and then the recordings once they're available for each of those webinars. Thanks for asking that. Any other, let's see. How many attendees today? Let's see, we got 10, which is pretty good because I think we had 12 register, so not bad. All right, here's a question. With Hurricane Michael, were the landowners able to get any value for the down timber from a harvesting perspective, not government assistance or insurance? That's a really good question, and the short answer is some were, but not all. The big problem after Hurricane Michael was access. There was basically no way to get to the timber because all the timber was down and blocking the access, and so that was the conundrum with Hurricane Michael. And whenever there's a huge disaster that takes down trees like that, it's access that's the problem. The trees are down, but they're not down in a way that they're readily accessible. So landowners that had the means to get to those trees, you know, they were able to get to some of it, but a lot of it unfortunately was not harvested. But thankfully we had the block grant program, and I think we've had I think almost 1,000 of the landowners that had damage from Hurricane Michael were able to get assistance from that block grant. So not all was not all was lost, thankfully. Thanks for that question, Lee. I'll keep the presentation going here if anybody else has any questions or comments, or if you have something to share, if you've learned a lesson. I know a lot of you have been through these storms as well. Please share your words of wisdom, stuff that I've missed. This is kind of a compilation of various resources, but I don't have all the answers, and I invite your feedback if you've got anything to share. While I'm waiting for additional questions or comments, I'll go ahead, and I want to thank our partners and supporters for this webinar series and other programs that we do. Florida Forest Service provides support for our program each year. This year we've gotten some support from the National Wildlife Federation, Farm Credit Associations of Florida, supporting these particular webinars. Also our forest carbon webinars that we're doing, they're also supporting those. And then the SFI Implementation Committee provides financial support every year to help with our operations, our program operations. And then, of course, we give all kinds of partnership and content support from the Forestry Association, Fish and Wildlife Commission, Florida Tree Farm Program. These are all really important partners in our land stewardship efforts in Florida. So we got another question come in. How many days or months after a hurricane is down timber valuable for a salvage harvest? Yeah, that's a great question, and generally we're looking at probably less than 2 months, 2 to 3 months, absolute max. After that, especially in the southeast, things start to decay pretty quickly. So if you can get to it within 6 weeks, 2 months, that's where you're gonna be able to salvage, especially the solid wood product value. After that, it um, could be still valuable for pulp, for chips, and things like that, where the structural quality isn't as important. But the solid wood products, you're looking 6 weeks to 2 months, absolutely. And we're going to be going into that a bit more when we during that last webinar on August 26th on hurricane recovery and what to do after the storm. We're going to be getting into those kinds of questions. How soon do we need to get to the timber, and what do we need to look at when we're assessing the damage? Which trees should go? Which trees should stay? Have they been twisted? Are they leaning? All those kinds of questions. So, encourage you to tune into that one in a couple months. All right. Look at the chat. Look at the questions. Anything else? Go ahead and put those in if you've got any more questions. And if not, I really appreciate everybody tuning in today for this webinar. Again, I encourage you to access the materials. I'll have the recording for this webinar up probably tomorrow. The link will probably go out in tomorrow's email update. So make this available for folks that weren't able to join today. But I will keep this going for another minute or two, and if there are no further questions, then we'll after that we'll go ahead and sign off. Here we go. All right. Thank you very much, Lee. Appreciate that feedback. All right. Yeah. Thank you, Jonathan. Looking forward to that as well. All right, everybody. Well, when I end this presentation, the evaluation should come up. Go ahead and fill that out. And until next time, thanks for joining us and take care. Bye-bye.